Open image in new tab. Yeah. So now, let's try again. And I don't have the logs here. Okay, I will just I'll just go back on here then. So here we can see on this, so this other user with many more apps installed, we can see all the apps that are doing network calls. One feature of NetGuard is that you can allow network access or not. For example, Aura Store has network access allowed, but this app has no network access allowed, neither on Wi-Fi nor on mobile data. So you can really decide to change this, and you can see also the number of attempts to access the network that were done. So if we look at this one, we can see that it did connect. This is like part of the Android system, and it connected to broadcom.psds.graphenoS.org, time.graphenoS.org, remote-provisioning.graphenoS.org. And so these are like from the system is connecting to this because I also enabled all the Android the system apps here. So not only are the user apps that the user installed, but also the whole operating system. You can configure NetGuard to log all of them. And then you can filter for every app, for example, what they're allowed to use. Element is a chat client for Matrix. And here you can see a red cross, because I saw it trying to connect to something called PostHog HSS, and I just blocked it. So you can say, hey, I want to allow or block. Here in the bottom, you can allow or block any websites that is connecting to. So here I installed this app named Element, and after installing it, I just said, okay, disable, forbid everything. Just see what it's trying to connect to. And when you do that, you can see that it's trying to connect to different domains. This one should only connect to the domains, the first two domains. The other ones, it shouldn't have a reason to connect there. It's probably some analytics or some bug because it's a chat system that you can self-host, and I have my own instance, so it has no reason to connect to the developer servers. So here, allowed, in green, I always allow my own server, and then the rest I just block it. And the PostHog HSS, I know this is analytics, so I know that this one should always be blocked. If I don't put any rule next to the other one, then it will take the default that's present here. So I just use the default, which is in this case always forbidden. So you can do, if you install a scooter app. That was the goal of the demo, was to install like a scooter app or a game. You can see that it's just coming, you just install it, and then it's already trying to reach out to many different companies you've never heard of, and some you've heard of, like Facebook. Without even opening the app, or just when you open the app, you didn't give your consent yet. You just install the app, open it, and it starts shooting, connecting to many different companies. Before you did anything. It's really strange. You just install an app, and you have all these notifications from NetGuard. Hey, it's trying to connect to Facebook, AppData, whitepages.com, and a lot of companies. And many of these, if you look what they do, it's either advertising company or data brokers, which are basically trying to build a profile on you and resell it to advertising companies, to credit scoring, mostly in the US, things like this. And they aggregate the data from all the different apps. So instead of, it's not just the operating system that sometimes is spying on you from Google or Apple. So also in every app can be full of trackers. And as I said, they usually don't ask you for your consent before start trying to shoot. So if you look a bit at what GDPR says, you can see clearly that the user, at the moment of you collect personal data from a user, you need to communicate specific information to them. They absolutely don't do that. If you look at what is personal data, you can see that it starts with things like Internet Protocol IP address, with cookie identifiers, device identifiers. So it usually contains that. And by doing this, these trackers, for example, your Facebook knows every app you have installed on your phone, what you're doing with that app, and they know, because they know all the different apps you have on the different devices, they can really target your behavior and provide statistics to the developers. Yeah, people who install this app, you installed your app, also have this and this and this other app, and they're located here, and they drive at 60 per hour in 50 kilometers per hour zones, or so many things they can get. So what can you do about this? So legally, I think every offender should receive a fine according to GDPR. I have no experience with legal action. The Belgian Data Protection Authority reported recently that they're understaffed and their independence is threatened. It's on their website. So I'm not sure this would lead anywhere, because it looks like even our Data Protection Authority is not in a good position, at least according to them. Or technically, you can filter network access. That's what I showed you a little bit using NetGuard. By just first saying, okay, block everything by default, and then for every network access, you decide to allow it or not. I played with that with like electric scooter apps. It's a pain in the ass to just try to identify what is what, but if it doesn't contain the name of the company in it, it's usually a tracker.
How many apps did you break by blocking specific trackers like that? Is there an app that just refuse to work because some of the requests are not working?
Yes.
Actively trying to block you to do that.
I didn't see an active behavior, so I played a bit. Sometimes I was like, okay, if I also disable this, does it still work? Oh no. Okay, I have to stop it, restart it. So there is sometimes a bit of play. Sometimes you see that some things like also Crashlytics, like something that are supposed to analyze crashes. Well, I see it coming. Maybe it's because the others are blocked, that it's trying to send a report there. So I blocked that as well. So maybe they don't know that there is this going on. So it might be smart to block, in fact, Crashlytics, Sentry, other platforms that report crashes. So, but usually on Android, all the calls are async, and because of the mobile use, the use on mobile data with low connectivity, usually the apps are quite resilient to having an endpoint not working. And when it's for the analytics, usually they don't block everything because they couldn't send their spying stuff. Because yeah, that's not crucial for the app, and they still want it to work for the users.
In the web world, when you have an ad blocker, there is some website that try to actively annoy you to disable the ad blocker and stuff like that. So it's not the case yet.
It's not the case yet. Yeah. However, on the other side, there is still a small but significant percentage of websites that have a real cookie banner and that ask you authorize or not tracking. Here, mobile apps, they don't ask anything. Huh? They just go for it. That's what I saw with almost all of them. Even, I think, when I tried banking apps from Belgium, they were sending data trying to contact Facebook. Just on first launch, which I think is really shows that even these big banks that have lawyers that are supposed to do things right don't. So not every company, but really a lot of them. And the more free the product is, the more you're the product. Yeah, in the settings there was this option from Android that's quite smart, which is so it appears as a VPN and it can work as a always-on VPN, which means that in the case NetGuard wouldn't launch, no network would be allowed to go. So you can really trust it quite well. There are some firewalls on systems that do not have this feature, and then if your protection is not there for a moment, then everything goes free. When you enable it with NetGuard by being off by default and always on, that means that normally nothing should get out without your consent.
Yeah, it just seems like a lot of manual work though. Is there like a way to load in a list you find somewhere of all trackers, maybe?
So there is, on that topic, there is, if you go in the settings, you can backup, export, import, you can also import host files. So for example, there is this, one way of blocking or filtering this is on the device. The other way is to do it on the network level. With a network firewall, that requires an additional device. There is the Pi-hole project that many people have heard about that uses a Raspberry Pi that you put on your network access, and then it will just filter everything on the DNS level mostly. You can import such files here. So you can import a host file. It will just block all the hosts that are defined there. And these, you can probably reuse the rules from the Pi-hole project, for example, or from ad blockers. Ad blockers go further because sometimes they say this part of the page has to be hidden, which is not, it's more specific than here. On the other hand, the good thing with NetGuard is that you can filter on them based on every app. So you can say, well, maybe the Google Translate app can connect to Google servers, but not my game, or do things like this. You also have this issue. I saw a lot of connectivity to Google Firebase. And Firebase is like an online database hosted by Google that makes it easy to persist data from apps, and it also does analytics. So that might be a way for Google to still get data from many apps who are using this to persist users' data. And so as I saw, you can also see the system apps. And here I'm using a specific version of Android called Graphene OS, which I trust to not leak data. And when I saw like all the URLs used by these system apps, they're all ending in grapheneos.org. So the Graphene OS project has their own servers that receive these requests, and then sometimes forward it to other services. This is something for like network time synchronization, to make a GPS location easier. There are a few services that the operating system calls. I tried this on a Samsung. And what you have to know is that if you buy a Samsung Android phone, you have all the Google spyware, but the Samsung one is doing twice more spying on you. And the good thing is you can remove all of the Google apps. Like on the Samsung smartphone I use, I could remove really YouTube, all the Google apps that are usually not removable, but I could not remove the Samsung ones. So it's quite annoying. Yeah, so you can export, import, backup the forbidden list. I didn't find an easy way to say this domain from the mobile interface, this domain just forbid it for all the apps. I would have to put it in a file and then import that file in the app. And I didn't find a subscription link to be able to automatically update. I don't know I don't think there was this option to automatically subscribe like an ad blocker to the list of domains that shouldn't be there. I would love to see such a project where people share these blocking lists per app so we know exactly what works for each app or not. The other thing I wanted to talk about these trackers is when you use Aurora, maybe you've seen it, but yeah, I didn't use it so much. So when you're looking at installing an app from Aurora, let's take one of these Rise of Empires eyes. That sounds like something full of trackers. You have access to the reviews and the screenshots from the app, but the other thing that's quite interesting is when you scroll, you have this part called privacy, and here the red doesn't show well, but it says 19 trackers found. 19 is quite high. Usually it's around 10, and you can click and you can see the list of all the trackers that were found, from AppsFlyer, Google Crashlytics, Hockey App, Tune, Facebook Ads, Facebook Share, Facebook Analytics, Google Analytics, Facebook Login, lots of Facebook, huh? Chartboost, Amazon Advertisements, ironSource, Google Tag Manager, Unity 3D Ads, Bugly, AppLovin, I don't love apps, Google Firebase Analytics, Google AdMob, AIB Open Measurement Open. So that's an example, and this is based on the Exodus project, which is a very interesting project that basically audits Android apps that are published. You can either upload an APK, or it will also look at apps from the Play Store. It will audit them, and then it will analyze the package, and extract the list of trackers that are available in it. And also the use of permissions. So some apps use, here, if I look at this video game, Rise of Empire, and I look at the permissions here, you can see it's supposed to be able to run at startup, run foreground service, view my Wi-Fi connections, access some billing, that sounds okay. Retrieve the list of running apps. Prevent the phone from sleeping, that sounds okay. So it has these capabilities, and some of these are abusive and are used mostly by the trackers. And Exodus extracts all of this information on many apps, so you can see in advance, before installing an app, what are the trackers that have been identified in it without having to launch it. And so it's a good indication if you're hesitating between two apps. You can also look at the ones with the least trackers. That should give you less work to filter afterwards. And they also have, so you can check any app. Is there an app you would like to check?
Untapped.
Oh,
Untapped.
how do you spell it?
So you're tracking.
On tap?
With a U in the beginning.
U on tap?
Without O. U
Ah, untap.
T-A-P. I think there's double P and then a P there.
Yeah. So it's here, you can see but the Facebook IAB, prepaid mobile, and then it wants to access your camera, read your calendar. Use biometric hardware. So use a fingerprint. Oh, that's maybe so you can secure the list of beers you've drank and your wife doesn't know you had so many. Write to your external calendar. Maybe they want to organize Congress of Beer Drinkers. Your advertising ID, this is now a permission as well. So it's quite interesting to have a look at this. So yeah, have a look, and you can also, when you click at the trackers, you can also list the trackers, and what's interesting, you can list them by number of applications. And so you can see what are the most popular. You can see 59% of all the apps using Google Firebase Analytics of the ones that were analyzed by this. It's not the whole Play Store, but it's still 93,000 apps. Google AdMobs, Google Crashlytics, Facebook Login, Facebook Share. So you can see Facebook in about 20% of the apps. Unity 3D in about 11%. IAB measurement, we've seen this one. AppsFlyer is also common. And then you really get into all these data broker stuff that you've never heard about. What is amplitude, augury presage in 2,000 apps. So it's also interesting to see a bit what are these companies paying on you. Finally, a practice that I recommend nowadays is if you want to help your privacy. So it's also to use, as I showed a little bit, to use multiple user profiles on Android. This allows you to fake having multiple phones, but still only carry one in your pocket. It still has the same IP address when it's connecting online, but it allows you to really separate the data, and they're encrypted with different passwords. You always, when you boot your phone, have to open the main user profile that has the admin rights, but then you can have other user profiles. Typically, it was designed for your kid, your wife, to have multi-user, something which you don't have on iOS. If you have an iPad and you want to let someone else use it, and they say, oh, it's looking all the time, can you add my face recognition? Oh, and that person has access to your bank account now. So on Android, you can have multiple user accounts. And so you can really isolate all these tracking apps inside separate user accounts that you only open when you need to take an electric scooter or play stupid video games in your 4 hours commute or stuff like this, and keep it closed the rest of the time. That's how I do it. I also have a user profile with all my banking stuff, so it's usually encrypted. It doesn't, the password is it's also different, so it's harder to guess because we put a lot of cryptographic keys to authenticate to important stuff like financial data.
Can you some of these users that you, for example, use one secretly and one that anyone who would take your phone would open that one first?
So you have the default one and then the other ones, and indeed, if someone doesn't know about these user accounts, when you know about it, they're easy. You have this logo here when it's enabled. But if you don't know what it is, then someone sees your phone, doesn't know about it, and could not know about the other user accounts. Or you could pretend, oh, that's my brother's, I don't know the password. So you can also use that to conceal a bit some data and apps around it. One of the constraints is that it's really hard to share data between user profiles. They can access, you can give phone calls and SMS permissions to user profiles if you want or not. So they could share the SMS database without the user. So sometimes if I need to share a link between two user profiles, I will send an SMS to myself. Or use a network service. But that's slightly annoying, but it's also a good feature, right? I think they also have a different advertising ID. So you have the same IP address, but that's when you're using mobile data is often shared with many people on IPv4. We don't have IPv6 on mobile in Belgium yet, I think, anyway. And if you're using Graphene OS like me, you can also have the Google Play services work as a normal app that only exists in a user profile. So here, for example, my default user profile doesn't have the Google Play Google services running, and there is nothing reaching out to Google when I'm using it. However, when I want to drive, I can switch to another user profile, and there I have the Google Play services that give me maps when I want to use an electric scooter, because with no map, it's a bit hard to find them. And also to Google Maps if I want to skip on traffic jams. But that version of Android only works on Google Pixel phones, so you have to buy a Google Pixel phone and then change the operating system. It's quite easy, but it's still something you have to do.
What was it?
Graphene OS. It's here.
Have you used Lineage OS or something?
I used Lineage OS before Graphene OS appeared. I've been playing with Android for 10 years or something. The main issue I have with Lineage OS is that the updates, the support varies a lot. I had that Samsung phone, then I was sick of having all these Samsung stuff spying on me. I was like, oh, I can put Lineage, and then no update for a year. No security update for a year. I didn't like that so much. So I switched to a Pixel phone with Graphene OS, and I'm very happy, especially with also this capability to put all the Google apps or Google services in a locked user profile, so they are only running when I need them, and I don't need to carry two phones anymore.
Opinion about EOS?
Sorry?
Opinion about EOS?
iOS from Apple?
No, EOS.
So there are different approaches to improve the privacy on Android. One is to say, the Graphene OS approach was to say, if you want to connect to the push notifications to the services from Google, do it with their apps. The other approach is to use something called MicroG, with, I believe, EOS is using, which is basically replacing the software running to still connect to the Google servers because it's mandatory for the notifications, but with your own service stack. I think it's also a possibility. I didn't test it. I looked into it. I didn't test it. It might not work for every app or for every part of the services, but I think it's good to have that alternative as well. And then the rest of the distribution, I don't know about it. I think it's good to have distribution that has supported devices and good support. I think they also provide that. I also have a PinePhone, if you heard about it. It's a smartphone that runs Linux. I don't have the PinePhone Pro. The normal one is extremely slow to do anything, so it's just a pain in the ass. But it's really good to see that we now start 10 years later to have Linux smartphones coming. And I think we will probably get there somewhere in a few years, but it's slow. The PinePhone Pro looks usable and twice the price.
One day. One day.
Yeah. So I read about some people using the PinePhone or PinePhone Pro on a daily basis, and instead of using a shiny desktop environment, like you can use KDE or GNOME for phones, and visibly it looks good, it's just too slow. They use something more minimalistic where they can also use the buttons on the phone, like scroll down menus, and then that's really fast on the GPU because it uses less resources. Also, the cool thing on PinePhone, or if you use, how is it called? There is a project to port Linux to modern phones, Postmarket OS, which is basically to add support for many smartphones, especially older ones for mainstream Linux with the latest security updates. You can use a real Firefox with all the add-ons you want. It's super slow, but you have all the add-ons. That was it for my talk demo.
Another question about Netcard, and if you don't know, that's okay, because I will test it anyway. Does it run on Android TV?
I never tried Android TV.
Okay, so I will try it.
Yeah. It should. Yeah, I think they have a good support for just.
Yeah, because it uses the VPN functionality of Androids.
Yeah, and it works on Android 5.1 and later, so that's quite good.
So I'm interested if you have that functionality on Android TVs and if you can install that. Because
If you can install it, should work.
TV is a tracker hellhole.
Sounds fun.
Is there a way to see what kind of data is being sent to those by those trackers?
So the main issue is that most of this is using HTTPS, which is encrypted. So if you want to look into it, you need to go a bit further, and that's being done. But it's more challenging. You need to generate your own TLS certificate, install it in the operating system, make sure that the apps don't especially pin the certificate of their own servers. Most of them don't bother. Maybe banks do. And then you have to use something called man-in-the-middle proxy, MITM proxy, on the network. And this tool allows you to intercept, modify, log all the decrypted data from the traffic. So if you want to see what's actually being shared, you should use this software, generate your own certificate that you put on the device. And
For that, you probably need to be root. I'm not sure you can.
Yeah, I don't know about it.
Are not using the list of certificates that the user can manipulate, or there is some subtleties. Let's say you cannot just import a certificate in your phone and expect all the app to use it by default. And I'm not talking about pinning.
Yeah, okay.
Just about the way Android is working.
Hmm.
Just to avoid malicious actors that push a certificate in your phone using the normal feature and then man in the middle import the apps.
So maybe banks worked on this functionality because they like to spy on their users' content.
It's not easy as it used to be with the early version of Android.
Okay, yeah.
When in the middle.
And the other approach you can probably do is decompile the APK, download the APK, decompile it. Not decompile the source code, but open the archive of the app and then change the certificates there, rebuild it, and then launch that. That should also work. But then the signature of the app is different, but you should, if you don't care, that might work. Yeah.
Can you use multiple VPN at the same time on Android?
No, that's in fact an issue with NetGuard, is that if you aren't to say, I always use my VPN for my own server where I have Pi-hole and other stuff and my MITM proxy, you cannot use multiple VPNs at the same time as on Android. So either you decide to just do everything on the server and not use NetGuard and use your own VPN, or use NetGuard, and then it has an option to forward everything through a SOCKS interface, SOCKS.
So you could use that with man in the middle proxy.
Hmm?
You could use that directly with man in the middle proxy, because man in the middle proxy is exposing a SOCKS proxy.
Yeah,
So you could
yeah.
use NetGuard directly to relate to man in
Mhm.
the middle proxy, and you don't have the issue of configuring the proxy to all your apps one by one, or at Android Low and Ruby Network.
I think it can forward, NetGuard can forward all of your traffic to a SOCKS proxy, including MITM. So that's a way the developer found to still be able to pass all of the data to another server. SOCKS is another norm for, putting all the traffic inside one connection, encrypted connection, and getting it out on the other side. Thanks for listening. If you have any other, do you have any other question or topics now? I hope you learned some things about tracking an Android and demo effects, and that this might help you helping with your privacy. I didn't find anything similar on iOS, but I don't use iOS much. Also, it doesn't have multiple users, so that's an issue as well.